Hey, we're back with Relative Recovery, a podcast on chronic illness, healing, and recovery unfiltered. Lauren and I were not planning on recording today. We were actually talking about a future podcast session, but we really got into it on kind of how to talk to your provider when you have really complicated symptoms and how to work within the unfortunate system that we have in this country. So we felt that that was a really important topic to capture the moment. So this is super unplanned, unedited, truly unfiltered. Okay, Lauren, kick us off. Remind me where we were when when we decided to start recording.
So we were actually talking about like the differential diagnosis of different types of chronic dizziness. And as we were planning it out, we were talking about how in school we learn so if you're a provider, this isn't new information to you, but if you're a patient, this might completely change the way you think about how you talk to your provider, right? So when we're in school, we learn that history is pretty much everything. Right? So by the
Hmm.
time I get to my special test, is what we call it in physical therapy, or the doctor gets to their diagnostic tests that they're going to order or the medications that they're going to prescribe, we're already about 80% of the way there. So the information that you give me leads me to the decision tree that I'm going to follow about 80% of the way. So by the time I get to the place where I'm going to confirm my thoughts, I have about two, maybe three things in my mind, and I'm going to go through that Rolodex that I have and pick the
Hmm.
tests and measures that confirm those thoughts or rule them out so that I can start over, right?
Hmm.
So if we think about it that way, if you give me, when you open a recipe, you want to learn how to make chili, and it starts off with, it was a Tuesday and it was stormy and I was da 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 da, right? And you give them that whole long history that they have to scroll through, they're going to get lost in the message. And then by the time they get to the recipe, they might end up just doing the thing that they think it's most likely because they're
Hmm.
completely lost in the process.
Or just out of time,
We're out of time. Yeah.
and they have to give you an answer.
Exactly. Like, have you ever experienced that? I know you don't live, thank goodness, with like severe chronic illness, but you're a
Yeah,
person who's been in the medical system. So, have you ever
yeah.
experienced that where you went to a doctor and you felt like your interpretation was they weren't listening or they just did the thing they want to do?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know, I actually don't know what qualifies as chronic, but I've had stomach issues ongoing for the
That's fair.
last decade plus. Um, and the first time I went to a GI doctor, someone highly recommended, I really respected her. Um, and I went to her with what I now know are these sort of weird symptoms. Um, and this will probably again get into our unfiltered um, category. But yeah, so by the end of college, I was basically ending every day with like excruciating abdominal pain, feeling like bloated, constipated, and just like miserable until I would wake up the next morning. And I tried to explain this to the doctors, and I'm totally guilty of the recipe analogy that you used. Like, I want to sit down and tell you my whole life story. And like that is something that really affects your whole life, right? So like there were these sort of, in my mind, relevant details, but to this gastroenterologist, like she's listening for a few things. She's listening for diarrhea, constipation, like these traditional, Crohn's, like these traditional diagnoses. And so, you know, I wasn't, I didn't meet the criteria for TMI, right? But I was
Most of
still
these
having this
patients
horrible
have chronic
pain.
GI problems, so you aren't alone in sharing this
Great.
information. Okay.
Great. So hopefully someone relates. But I was still having this horrible pain and discomfort by the time I got to the end of the day. And the doctor would look at me and go, well, like that should be like you should be fine. Like you should like, and at one point I think she or another doctor I saw said to me like, well, it just sounds like you're having a bad reaction to like normal stuff in your colon. I was like, okay, that tells me zero. So I had my scopes, I had everything done, everything came back normal. And the only thing she pulled up was she comes back to me and she goes, well, this is really interesting. My ears perk up. And she goes, did you know that you're allergic to shrimp, scallops, and clams? And I was like, well, no, I don't eat seafood. I don't eat meat. And maybe the last time I had a shrimp, I was like 7. Um, but I've never eaten any of that stuff. Never plan on it. I don't think that's relevant to the conversation.
Even,
And
by the way, when my dad would try to bully you into eating meat, you would not eat meat.
I don't even remember that.
I was there. I was there on the day of your trauma when you no longer ate animal products, by the way. I don't know if you remember that,
You
but it was the
were
lobster pot.
the lobster? Oh,
I
you
was there.
guys
We were
were
in
there
Cape Cod
too?
when we were little kids. I'm 100 years older than Joelle, so I
It
remember that she had
it
like a
was
mental breakdown
Maine.
when the lobster screamed in the pot.
It was Maine.
Or wherever we were. I don't know. Wherever we were, there was a lobster
It
pot
was
and there
it
was
was
a
the
very
eve.
traumatized young
It was
child.
like the eve of either my 10th or 11th birthday, probably like my 11th birthday. And of course, we had reservations the next night at a lobster restaurant because it was Maine. Um, and so I sat there and I ordered my buttered noodles. And
Sorry, I didn't mean to
anyway,
interrupt,
that's
but
a
I was
fun
just like,
story.
oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I got bullied at Thanksgiving. I was the first of you all to be really difficult at Thanksgiving. Now I'm the easy one compared to the celiac and the dairy-free and the vegan. So you all gave me a hard time.
Whoever would have thought you'd be the easy one, you know?
What goes around comes around. Um, so I ended up getting like prescribed some medicine that I don't know how much it ever helped. And a few years later, I went back to another doctor who was more like holistic health, and she put me on a low FODMAP diet that I couldn't get off of. Ended up at a nutritionist who like literally coached me back into eating like bread and apples and dairy. Like, remember, already a vegetarian, so low FODMAP for anyone who's ever tried it, it's extremely restrictive. And I did that for about 6 months, and this doctor never realized I was on it for that amount of time and didn't know how to bring me off of it. Um, so, I kind of more or less on my own identified some triggers. I still don't know what my issue is. It's ongoing. It's not every day anymore, but it it's there. Um, and no one's ever been able to give me an answer. And I'm sure I haven't done a good job explaining it either. But it's hard. Like
Hard.
how do you go about explaining those complex symptoms when they don't even make sense in your own head?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, right? If you don't know, it's like both sides are playing with two different manuals. Like you don't know what you need to say because you aren't a
Yeah.
doctor, and the doctor can't make sense of the things that they're being told because there's all these pieces to this web and they get 15 minutes. And then what ends up happening is this really sad fracture of your relationship with your doctor,
Yeah.
right? So, and people with chronic illness, like I've experienced plenty of medical invalidation or medical gaslighting. Like we also objectively experience that. And not every negative experience we have is medical gaslighting, right?
Hmm.
And it's important that we are able to have that uncomfortable conversation. And I'm sure that some people are going to feel really uncomfortable with my saying that. And you're going to feel like I'm taking up for the healthcare providers, right? But I'm also saying I've been a patient and I've been on the receiving end of
Right.
it. But we also have to remember this 80% rule. So if I give a cardiologist information about my GI tract, I have now derailed that part of the appointment. So one thing that I'll coach patients on is like, I understand that you're going in with this trauma. And so with your trauma, you're going to expect them to fail you. That's how human beings work, right? Oh, it's just
Mm.
another provider who wasn't listening. And we kind of forget that like both of us are sitting at the table. And it's my
Hmm.
responsibility to remember that unfortunately the US healthcare system is broken and people are not given time to collaborate between specialties. And that's not your fault. And that's not your provider's fault. Your provider is also miserable in the current system, right? And
Yeah.
so if we can kind of all have empathy for one another and we can start to remember what the rule book says, we can start to lead our providers to better and more effective appointments. I know you only have 10 to 15 minutes. I know you're a cardiologist. I'm not going to hold space for my GI problems because you're a board certified cardiologist. You have only looked at the plumbing and the electricity of the human body for the last 30 years. You don't know what a stomach ache is, right? You don't know what the flu is anymore. No disrespect to cardiologists, right? And so when we start to talk to our doctors, what I will, first of all, cherry pick the referrals that I give patients. So I try to pick providers that I know do not medically invalidate their patients. And then I will coach my patient on how to show up to that appointment fairly so that they're not disappointed, right? If I send you to the allergist, I want you to only talk about your MCAS symptoms, which are plenty and widespread, but I want you to really focus on the key ones so that we can lead to the tests that we need to get ordered.
What symptoms?
So for like a patient with in this population, they might have something called MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome.
Okay, thank
And
you.
the highlights would be that it's an elevated histamine response. So heat intolerance, flushing. So these people, they kind of turn red. It kind of travels up their neck and goes up their face. They might have non-itchy rashes that break out on their body. They might have a lot of allergies. Like if someone starts to tell me they have allergies to 10, 15 things, I'm going to start to think like, are you just allergic to being alive, right? And in that case, it's probably a histamine disorder.
Yeah.
And so there are some really key hallmarks, and the tests are not very good at baseline. The tests for this diagnosis are only about 30% accurate across the board. So now I've got to find you a provider who I know is going to validate your experience. I've got to find a provider who is educated in this rare, relatively uncommon diagnosis, but very common in our population. And then I've got to get a patient to focus during that appointment and present them only with the things that have to do with their allergen exposure in order to get to the place that we need to get, which is the test. I can't order the tests, so I need a doctor to order them. And so if you start with that long story, by the time you get to the important stuff, you're out of time, and then their only opportunity to help you is not to sit down and educate you. Their only opportunity to help you is to order more tests or to prescribe a pill.
Yeah.
And then we feel invalidated. Right?
Right.
We feel like, oh, it's just another provider who doesn't care. It's another provider who doesn't understand.
Right. A
And it's
catch-all
exactly. And that might be true.
option.
They might have been a total jerk, right? Like I remember I went to a doctor early on after my head injury, and this was a referring provider for me as well. So I kind of went in with a little bit of pressure because I only wanted them to know so much. I wanted it to be a good appointment because like, our ortho clinic was receiving patients from this person. And I was having a lot of dizziness when I would turn my head, and I was misjudging spaces. So I was bumping into doorways a lot. So they would actually just like, it was like just funny at work. It was just like, oh, Lauren's Kramering through a doorway again kind of thing, right?
Well,
And
I do that
so,
too, but I don't think
and
it's
so
the
I'm
same
talking to
issue.
the doctor, and my goal was I wanted my neck. I wanted imaging on my neck. I wanted to see if there's something going on there. And the doctor says to me, and I actually I gave him a good succinct tip. Like I did a good job of doing that part because I knew what test I wanted and I wanted to lead the witness to the thing I wanted. And he totally went left, pulls up a chair, scoots over to me and says, a lot of women have a hard time sometimes. That's what he did with his hand and said that to me.
What?
Yes. And he says, I'm going to give you my friend who's a psychologist phone number, and I really want you to call him. Like, and he got the business card and he put their email, their cell phone, and their business number was on the card. He's like, I really want to make sure we take care of you. I think that you need to go to therapy. Yeah.
Because you were misjudging spaces.
Yes. So it turns out I had like I had a large loss in my right ear of the way that my nerve fired. I have an upper cervical instability. So there were a lot of actually very objective findings about why I was having these problems that I described very clearly. That would be true medical invalidation, right?
Yeah.
But
Textbook.
textbook invalidation, right? And that does happen to us, but then we become more sensitive to it as well. Right. And that's where context and depth is really important because we have to kind of step back and think, is this true medical gaslighting? If so, cut them off the list, never go to that provider again. Let us know in this space so that we don't refer patients to that provider and no one else is exposed to that trauma. Right. Is this that I provided them with the blog version of a recipe instead of the recipe?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's hard. It's hard to sit in that feeling. It's hard to sit in that reflective thought. But it is really important because it's going to change the way you interact with providers for the rest of your life, and it will improve the care that you receive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's so important.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
So when you go to your next GI doctor, eventually,
yeah.
you would start to kind of say, like, A, these are my symptoms, not like everything I've ever done. These are my symptoms, right? And this is the part of my symptoms that impacts my quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of the day, I have whatever it is. I have this pain, I have this bloating, and these are the tests I've already had. And like whether you have a piece of paper or whether you like have a
Mm-hmm.
script that you read, I'll help patients write out scripts sometimes. I've had
Mm,
a colonoscopy, an endoscopy. I've done a breathing test for H. pylori. I've done this. I've done that. I've tried a low
all of it.
FODMAP diet. So now you're
Yep.
helping your doctor rule things out.
Yeah.
Then you give your provider a minute to breathe, right? Think about it like a wave just came over their snorkel, okay? And they need a second. So you don't have to fill every
Right.
ounce of space in that moment. And you say to them, like, I know that there is something going on with my body. I understand my body. I've tried so hard to get better. Can you think of anything else that we can try?
Mm-hmm.
And you give them a chance to think.
Yeah.
And they
It's not
might
like
disappoint you.
filling out a quiz online.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you got mostly A's.
And you give them a chance to think, right? And they very well might disappoint you. They might say, you know what, I'm not the right person for you. But
Mm-hmm.
they might say, if they're a good provider, they can say the words, I don't know, which is a very
Mm-hmm.
hard thing for us to say in today's world, whether or not we're a healthcare provider. I don't
Yeah.
know is very hard for us as human beings to say. But they might say, I don't know, but I think this person can help you. And
Mm-hmm.
that is a win. It may not feel good. It may not feel
Yeah.
like an answer, but that is a win because you got them to pause in a busy, overwhelming day and think for a
Mm-hmm.
second and problem solve for you. And that is huge. And so this is a big responsibility I take on with my patients because I tend to get just like weird referrals. I don't know, can you try? Literally will be something that I see on a script sometimes. Okay.
Great.
And so I'll say to the patient, like, I may not find it today. I'm going to go through what the most likely things are, right? If you've already had that test, I don't have to do it again, but I'm going to go through what the most likely things are. And then I might not have an answer for you today. And I want you to come back and we will do more testing. And if I can't find it, I will find you somebody who can,
Mm-hmm.
right? And now I'm setting it up where, like, the expectation isn't that I know everything. That's not a fair expectation.
Right. Right.
I
Or that you can
don't.
read my mind.
Right.
I was gonna say while the doctor has to be able to say, I don't know, the patient has to learn how to not say I don't know, probably. Because I will do that. I'll be like, is it a stabbing pain? Is it a dull pain? I don't really know. I just know I can't move, right? Like that's not helpful. So hopefully we're going to be able to help identify how to talk about some of those things.
Do you know how important what you just said is? So first of all, that's how pain works. How the science of pain works is that you lose discrimination ability. You
Yeah.
lose the ability to know what's stabbing, what's this, what's that, right?
Yeah.
All your brain experiences is that I have this pain.
Mhm.
And my job is to ask you questions about what that pain feels like. And you may not be able to answer that question at the first appointment.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's you sitting at the table not having the information, but that's not a blame game. That's actually a really important part of how human beings work. So what I might say to a patient is, I totally understand your dizziness is just it feels constant. You can't even tell if it feels different at different times. I
Yeah.
totally appreciate that. Can you track it for me for the next week until you come back?
Right.
I think you probably feel different types of dizziness at different times with different triggers, and you've lost the ability to perceive that because you feel it all of the time. But if you
Mhm.
can give me better information, I can tease out better answers for you.
Yeah.
And you would be amazed just knowing that your pain is so pervasive that your brain actually can't help you get that information
Mm.
will change your experience. So now when you have your pain, you can kind of think about, ooh, does this pain feel the same as yesterday's pain? And maybe there are patterns that we have missed because of the science of how chronic pain actually works.
Totally. Yeah.
Like, is it different at different times of your cycle? Is it different when you've been upright more during the day versus when you've been seated more during the day? Do you actually have symptoms of pelvic congestion syndrome, which it sounds like you might want to get ruled out? And so it'd be a little interesting
Thanks,
because you
Doc.
haven't had a baby, but still, like, it could happen, right? And so
Hmm.
that can cause bloating at the end of the day. That's not always food related, but it's actually more activity related, and it's related to how upright you are. So are there pieces where we're going to a GI doctor? And I don't know that this is true for you, but are we going to a GI doctor because our symptoms feel GI related,
Yeah.
but they're actually a totally different body system? And so, of course, I'm constantly disappointed with every GI doctor I go to because you
Yeah.
don't know that there's other conditions that sound like that.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Do you have pelvic floor dysfunction? And this is common in our population, right? So, because the pelvic floor is innervated by your autonomic nervous system. And so, if I lose my pelvic floor, we call it a soda can analogy. So, your diaphragm, the thing that helps you breathe, is at the top. Your pelvic floor is at the bottom. Men have a pelvic floor too. They tend to forget that, right? We all forget that. And then you have your abdominal wall. And that pressure system creates the container for things to move through your GI tract. But if your GI tract gets bloated and is in pain, your body parts move away from painful areas, right? If my leg hurts, I lean away from that leg, right? Your
Hmm.
whole body does that naturally. And so when people have bloating, it tends to be that they lose that tension in their abdominal wall. And so now I'm losing one of the edges of my soda can.
Hmm.
And if I have pelvic floor dysfunction, I'm losing the bottom of my soda can. And if I have
Mm.
dysfunctional breathing patterns from chronic pain, I've lost the top, right? So now all of a sudden I have this really complicated, messed up pressure system. And as I'm active during the day, I lose the functionality of that pressure system more and more, and I end up with pain at the end of the day. And that's actually
Yeah.
a GI problem, but it's actually not a GI problem. It's a motor control and it's a
Yeah.
pelvic floor and an abdominal wall problem. And if you can restore those areas with a pelvic floor therapist and you can improve your GI motility, sometimes you can have, right? So there's all these pieces that you as a patient would never even know and your
Yeah.
provider may not know, right? I only know
Yep.
about all this weird stuff because my patients have all kinds of weird stuff. So I've learned over time. But 5 years ago, I didn't know some of these things. And so we
Yep.
can't expect people to know everything like they're an AI generated individual. We have to kind of start to cherry pick through.
Yeah. Definitely. Woo. Well, I think maybe we went a little farther afield with that one than we intended, but um,
That's just the way it's going to be, you know?
that's how it's gonna go. So in the next one, we're hoping to have a really fun guest and talk about how some of this is going to relate to distinguishing your dizziness symptoms across different potential diagnoses, right, Lauren?
Yes, exactly. So
Okay.
we're gonna try to detail them out and then talk
So we're
about how
gonna
they
tie we're
relate
gonna
to
tie this back in a
dysautonomia.
little bit.
But I do think it's really important. So to kind of summarize our key points, right? Know that the healthcare system is set up against all of us, and it just is what it is. And so we can feel our feelings about that, and don't let that muddy the waters during your appointments. Give the recipe, not the blog version. Try to remember that specialists are specialists for a reason, and they aren't going to know about the rest of your body systems, unfortunately. Okay? And then know that there are bad providers out there and there are providers who care very, very much and they're just overwhelmed. And let's not try to have our trauma flooding make some of those appointments with people who really would try to help us feel messy because we've been in that space before where we felt invalidated. Try to give them the benefit of the doubt when you can and try to ask around for referrals of people who've had good experiences, right? So
Yeah,
try to be really discriminatory with who you see, if at all
absolutely.
possible, knowing that you have a complex chronic illness. And if you don't get the help you need, don't give up. See somebody else. Try again. And just kind of think about both of us have to be players at the table, and we both have to be playing with the same rule book in order to get to that finish line.
There it is.
Thanks so much. We appreciate you spending time listening to us.